I'm happy to have in the studio Carrie Leiterson. She's an environmental reporter in the Chicago area, and she writes for Midwest Energy News, among other things. You've been printed in a lot of places, haven't you?
Yeah, I used to work at the Washington Post and some other places
just
too.
that little place, okay. Are they having the same problems that the Trib is having in terms of cutting back? And
I think everywhere is. Yeah.
And unfortunately, one of the first places, one of the first areas it suffers is the environmental reporting. I saw that, the New York Times, last year or the year before, said, "Oh well, so much for our green reporting. We're going to cut that back," because as we know, it doesn't make any difference in the world, really. Also in the studio with me is Guy McPherson. Is it McPherson or McPherson?
Whatever you call me, I can assure you I've been called worse. So fire away.
And in print. And Guy McPherson is the professor emeritus of natural resources and ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Arizona. He is the author of Nature Bats Last, which is a blog, and the actual URL for that is guymcpherson.com. You told me something interesting as you walked in the door, Guy, and that is Tom Hartman wants you back on his show.
That's right. I was on his show about a week ago. I was scheduled
I heard it.
To be on just the opening few minutes. And when we finished that segment, somebody else was due up. So they talked to them for 15 minutes. In that intervening 15 minutes, I got a call from somebody on the staff and said, "We got to have you back on today." So I came back on after that first little segment. I came on the third segment of the show. And then somebody from the staff called me a few days ago and said, "Hey, we want to have you back on again. And I see you're going to be on a tour. Can you come to the studio in New York and we'll hook up with our studio in Washington, D.C.?" Mm-hmm. So apparently I said something that got his attention.
Well, yeah, you got everybody's attention that day. It was funny because I was listening to that program. I was out running some errands, and I heard the conversation. And then I heard Tom say, "Well, we have to get to a hard break. It's been great having you on the show." And I'm screaming at the radio. I said, "Screw the commercials. What's wrong with you? You got to continue talking." Well, apparently he figured that out. And I'm sorry. And I think there were a lot of people who felt the same way who were listening to that program. Because you said some things that, what you consider hard truths about what is happening on our planet and where we stand in the world of climate change. And it made my jaw drop. And probably, well, I saw some other people. I read on Tom's blog. I went to see, because he's done a post since then, which I have posted, and I've got the link on my website, MikeNovak.net. And it's your blog site is Nature Bats Last. And his was Hope Dies Last. And he's quoting Studs Terkel here. Right. And I think what happened is that Tom had you on. He obviously hadn't read much about you beforehand because he wasn't prepared for what happened. And I'm not blaming him for that at all. Until I heard you, on that show, I had not heard about you. And so I have subsequently done research on this question. Now, folks, I'm not a scientist. I'm a radio guy, all right? But that's got to be one of the problems in what you write about. We'll get into that in a second. The point is, if you want to read what Guy McPherson is writing about climate change and where we're headed, you can find that link on my website, MikeNovak.net, or just go to GuyMcPherson.com. And find I would encourage you to go to Guy's climate change summary and update, which you're constantly updating. When did you start that?
I started that in January of 2013. It was a couple thousand words at that point, and I updated it yesterday, and it's up to about 8,000 words now.
You're not counting the links, though. If you follow all the links, you'll be there for weeks.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And pretty much every statement there is linked, and most of those links are to the refereed journal literature.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some pretty solid evidence there that we have triggered events that are going to take us into the existential abyss.
Not existential abyss. You're talking about the physical abyss.
That's right. I'm talking about the end.
Physical, right. Exactly. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. One of the things I heard on Tom Hartman's show was the possibility that by 2020 we're going to be in hell in a handbasket here.
Well, I think that the evidence points towards a 4°C temperature rise by 2030 above baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Humans haven't existed on the planet at 3.5°C above baseline. In the northern hemisphere, the changes are going to come more quickly than they are in the southern hemisphere for a couple of reasons.
What are those reasons?
Well, one, there's so much methane being emitted out of the Arctic, particularly out of the Arctic Ocean. And so that's heating up the northern hemisphere far more rapidly than the southern hemisphere. Also, the northern hemisphere is where all the land is on Earth. Land masses heat up more than twice as fast as the global average. So the southern hemisphere has a third of Africa, South America, New Zealand, little island called Australia. That's it. The northern hemisphere is
a little island called Australia, which is practically on fire at this point.
That's right. That's right. And so you look at the interior of land masses, and that's where changes are happening particularly rapidly. And in the southern hemisphere, there's far greater water-to-land ratio than there is in the northern hemisphere. And water, ocean water, the marine environment is really good at ameliorating temperature changes, especially temperature increases that are ongoing now.
All right, we'll get into more detail, but start with your best-case scenario, worst-case scenario.
Well, I'm not sure I have cases. I have the evidence, and what I've done is compiled the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And the evidence indicates to me that we have triggered the clathrate gun or the methane bomb in the Arctic. This is one of the things James Hansen worried about in his book, Storms of My Grandchildren. And in addition, we've triggered an additional 30 or so self-reinforcing feedback loops.
That seems to be one of your key points, is that the self-reinforcing feedback loops are going to cause nonlinear change. That is, when you say nonlinear, it's unpredictable.
That's right.
I mean, you're predicting unpredictability.
Yes. Nonlinear, unpredictable, and in this case, all of the unpredictability leads to predictions that have greatly understated this situation with respect to climate change. So, for example, here's a quote from the journal Global Policy from February of last year. A suite of amplifying feedback mechanisms, such as massive methane leaks from the subsea Arctic Ocean, have engaged. That says to me that we've triggered the clathrate gun, that clathrates, methane hydrates, or methane is coming out of the Arctic Ocean at an exponential rate at this point. And the exponential function is kind of a scary thing. Mm-hmm. Because things happen so rapidly, so much more rapidly than we anticipate with our linear style of thinking, the kind of thinking that we're accustomed to.
So you're saying that carbon dioxide is kind of a innocent bystander compared to the methane that's being released?
Well, the combination is truly catastrophic. Looking only at carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, John Davies, writing for the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, on September 20th of last year, concluded that there will be very little habitat for humans by 2040. And that's just looking at carbon dioxide. So tack on one more greenhouse gas, methane, and it looks like things are really, really dire in terms of continuing the human experience on this planet.
I'm going to encourage folks to call in today, 773-763-9278, as you hear this stuff. And, I don't know how many scientists I've got out there listening to the program, but I'm certainly interested in people's opinions of this. We'll go through this as much as possible. I do want to bring Carrie into the conversation, because Carrie covers these things in a more immediate way, looking at things that are contributing to global warming, like our use of coal, fracking, oil spill in Lake Michigan, representing 20% of the world's fresh water, and here we are wondering just how much did they spill in Lake Michigan. Have you been following that? I know you have a little bit, but you're not necessarily writing a story on it, are you?
No, I'm not. And, I might not have the latest blow by blow, but, it does sound like, in the larger scheme of things, it's relatively small, but they did underreport and, sort of obscure the size of the spill. And
gosh, that's a surprise, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
That never happens. I still think about the Gulf of Mexico, where BP basically got off scot-free. Mm-hmm. We don't even know. I have no idea what the real damage caused was there. And they can use that track record to, I don't know, lay waste to Lake Michigan as well. This is just insane that we tolerate it, and it leads to things like the 400 blowing past 400 parts of carbon per million in our atmosphere. By the way, again, that's Guy McPherson in studio with me, Carrie Leiderson. And Guy is the author of Nature Bats Last, as in a baseball game. Carrie, you've been following the coal issue in Illinois. I've mentioned it on the show recently. Jeff Biggers has written a lot about it as well. I'm sure you're familiar with his work. Yeah. He says we're in a coal rush here, which is just a little bit scary when you think about the scheme of things and what Dr. McPherson is going to talk about in just a second. Where and in particular, it seems like there's a mad rush to chop down trees and strip mine down there. What's going on? Yeah, well, so Jeff's, talking about the situation in central and southern Illinois where there's some battles going on right at the moment over expanding existing mines and then, of course, clearing forests or, or farmland to do that. And the bigger picture with coal is really complicated and interesting because obviously we've been shifting to some degree away from coal as an energy source, really mostly because of fracking and the cheaper natural gas in the past few years. And also just the fact that a lot of the old coal plants are being forced to retire because they can't make the upgrades they need to meet federal regulations economically enough. But at the same time, so that's happening. But at the same time, the coal lobby and coal industry is still really powerful, especially in Illinois. So they're pushing hard for new uses for coal, for the quote unquote clean coal, and then the whole idea of exporting coal to China, which, that's not directly happening with the Illinois coal right now, but that's kind of the bigger picture. So basically the coal industry is fighting really hard and, so far fairly successfully to stay relevant and to keep growing. Well, but you've also written recently about how clean energy in the state is actually doing well at the same time. So it seems contradictory almost. Yeah, well, it's not necessarily contradictory for better or worse. We do and can have both coal and wind, both clean and dirty energy. We have a mix right now and we're not going to transition to all clean energy anytime soon. That's for sure. So whether we like it or not, we're going to continue to have a mix. And Chicago is really a hub, for clean energy research and manufacturing, in terms of, components for wind turbines and batteries and all that. But that doesn't, Illinois is not bad in terms of percent of renewable energy, but that's almost separate from the role that we play also in the actual clean energy research and manufacturing sector. But doesn't it put Governor Quinn in an odd situation where he's promoting coal use and then I guess he's of Obama's all of the above strategy? Yeah. Yeah, and I think he's able. It's not like they're necessarily directly competing in Illinois. So I think politicians can and have promoted both dirty and clean energy. It's not necessarily, there's different ways you promote them. And, you can give subsidies to both. You could definitely argue that much more subsidies shouldn't be given to dirty energy and could be given in numerous ways, much more to clean energy, different aspects of clean energy. And then there's the energy that is touted as clean, but the result of its extraction is awfully dirty, and that's fracking.
Right. Well, and,
Where
and also
natural
clean
gas.
coal. Yeah. I mean,
So there's no such thing as clean coal. That's my mantra on the show. It's no such thing as clean coal.
Right. And especially the mining, no matter how clean. And, they have gotten, aside from the carbon dioxide issue, which they still haven't figured out, they have gotten down to really low emissions with the other types of air pollution. But, if you're burning coal, you're going to have to get it out of the ground regardless. There's no getting around that. So, I mean, I agree that there's no clean coal in that aspect. And I don't know that people call natural gas clean necessarily, but it is always described as a bridge fuel and, cleaner than coal.
Well, I don't know. That's what I hear. It's what I see. The clean alternative is natural gas, except that they don't take the extraction into account when it's fouling waters and causing earthquakes and things like that. Now, Dr. McPherson, I look at you and I think, are you a doctor, by the way?
I am.
Okay, just want to make sure. This must seem almost silly, talking about these kinds of issues, because what you're saying is we're so far past that we're dithering. I've seen the fiddling while Rome burns kind of thing. While the planet perishes, here we are fighting these battles over whether we should strip mine or do fracking or whatever. And obviously it's not helping when we're burning coal.
Right. And so I have a couple of responses to that. First of all, I think that people should do what they love, that resistance against the dominant paradigm is an excellent idea. If the best judge of a man's character is in how he treats those who can do nothing for him, as somebody once said, though I can't recall who, then maybe the best judge of our character is in how we treat those, including non-humans, who can do nothing for us. Currently, industrial civilization drives 200 species to extinction every day. Currently, industrial civilization fouls the water and dirties the air, worse every single day. Currently, industrial civilization erodes all the soil from what was a once fertile country into the oceans. So I'm a huge fan of resisting the dominant paradigm by pretty much any means necessary. And if that means terminating subsidies for coal and, in fact, pointing out that there's no such thing as alternative energy. There are just derivatives of fossil fuels, not alternatives. How much oil does it take to make a solar panel? How much coal does it take to make a wind turbine? And so on. Then I'm a big fan of eliminating all of that. As Tim Garrett pointed out 5 years ago in a paper published in Climatic Change, only complete collapse prevents runaway climate change. I suspect it was too late then.
Yeah, that's one of the takeaways that I get from your blog is that as you say, complete collapse is the only thing that will save us, and it's probably too late. And what do you mean by complete collapse?
I mean, no food at the grocery store, no fuel at the filling station, no water coming out of the municipal taps. I mean, no part of industrialization must remain. And by the way, when that happens, if that happens, what that does, according to Clive Hamilton's latest book, Earth Masters, which came out about a year ago, is that all the sulfates come out of the air in a relatively short period of time, and so that adds 1.1 C to the temperature that we're at already above baseline, which is 0.85 C. That takes us to 1.95 C above baseline. What do you not know? That's the 2-degree target that is the political target we claim to be aiming for. Even collapse at this point takes us to 2 C.
The event of collapse itself boosts the temperature.
Because all the sulfates produced by industrialization drop out of the air. We saw this post 9/11. Within 3 days, temperature was profoundly changed. So when collapse comes, when the set of living arrangements goes away, then we trigger 2C or more just as a result of the sulfates not being in the air. So either way, we're done. If you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, then I propose that we do. And if that doing means getting rid of dirty coal, because there's no such thing as clean coal, as you point out, then let's do that. If that doing means doing almost anything different than what we've been doing for the last 150 years, I'm a fan. So let's do things differently. And I propose that at the level of individuals and families and communities as well as societies.
How do you see this playing out? or is that not your purview to do? I mean, you are. You're not a sociologist, so perhaps you don't have this, but you must have thought it through. I mean, you see is it famine, pestilence, civil strife, unrest, all of the above, and in what order?
Yes, all of the above, and bear in mind, I'm not a big fan. This is a lonely message of
you know what? You're a pariah in some places,
right? And so it's not that I want this to happen. It's not that I'm cheerleading for human extinction.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear, what I suspect will happen is that we will have collapse of American empire, that the set of living arrangements will go away in the United States and then in the world within the next few years.
A few years?
Within the next few years, yes.
I mean, are you talking a decade, 2 decades, or are you talking?
No way.
What goes away in a few years? The whole structure of the United States of America and the rest of the countries in the world?
Yes.
Okay.
That we don't have the ability to have water coming out of the taps. That we don't have the ability to deliver food to the grocery store and all that sort of thing.
And how does that infrastructure collapse?
We have either a Lehman Brothers on steroids event, a massive deflationary event, or a hyperinflationary event. So that triggers
panic and
it means that money becomes worthless.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so
which triggers a panic, of course.
Right. And so when the world's reserve currency is worthless, then I suspect that will have repercussions that go beyond the United States. So I would imagine that happens first before we have mass mortality of human beings. With that in mind, we already are observing 5 million people a year dying early deaths because of climate change. 5 million people a year. So there's a significant number of people dying already because of climate change.
I would assume that's heat-related, lack of water-related, sanitation.
Yes, there's interactions between climate change and water availability and sanitation. So most of those deaths are occurring in what we would call third world countries, in sub-Saharan Africa for the most part. So massive mortality of human beings hasn't affected the so-called first world yet, but the wolf is always at the door. It is not that far into the future.
Well, we do know that there's a massive amount of economic inequality in our country, only getting worse, in the world, only getting worse. There have been warning signs. That's, if you want to look at total collapse, I'm not sure I'm buying everything you're saying. Again, I'm not a scientist, but I do know that there are warning signs, and Carrie, you know these. Look at the economic inequality. Look at the garbage in the gyres in oceans all over the world. Look at the monarch butterfly. I mean, and its precipitous drop in population.
Right.
You talked about the number of species that go extinct every day.
Yes, right.
I mean, we've got these things in front of us that are actually happening.
Yes, that's exactly right. We also have this huge debt problem, right? When Barack Obama took office, the national debt, the United States national debt, it already exceeded all of the currency in the world combined, plus all of the value of the gold in the history of the world ever mined. The debt has gone up more than 50% since then. And so there's no way to repay that. When people actually recognize that our dollar bills are worthless, where does that go? So,
I'm sure you'll get an argument from Tom Hartman on that. About he's more of an economic philosopher than I am.
I get arguments all the time. In any event, to get back to your question, was how do I see this playing out?
Yeah.
I foresee collapse, which is ongoing. Currently, according to a Wall Street advisor, we're at 37.2% unemployment in this country. So this set of living arrangements hovers on the brink and has been decaying for quite some time. And so I see that ultimately going away. And what that does is trigger tremendous heating especially in the interior of large continents in the northern hemisphere. Where I live in the southwestern interior of North America, what that means is we see a temperature rise, an average temperature rise of not 2°C, but instead of 5 or 6°C. No human survives that beyond a period of weeks. And so there's this interaction between the industrial economy and climate change. And every day things get worse. Everybody I know thinks that every day things get better because we have all this interesting technology like smartphones. So where I see this leading ultimately is we run out of habitat for humans. First in the
What about the people who say, in the hot area, say, I'll move north to a cool area. If you're on the coast, I'll move inland to where the ocean isn't rising up over my home. Does this your scenario allow for migration?
Well, at some level, yes. But you have to bear in mind that just moving north in the northern hemisphere, moving from, say, Chicagoland to Manitoba, where it's a little cooler, isn't going to help grow food. And ultimately, I suspect the thing that will cause the most human mortality will be hunger, will be lack of food, will be famine. What we used to call famine back in the day, before we became so focused on individual lives instead of populations when it came to humans. So when you move far enough north, you run out of soils that are capable of growing food at scale. And ultimately, you run out of habitat, period, because the temperature swings as well as the high temperatures will cause massive plant mortality and already are causing massive plant mortality. So without food, it doesn't really matter how cool you can keep your body temperature.
Anytime, Carrie, you want to talk him off the ledge, you're welcome to jump in. I'm just imagining somebody who just happened to tune in on a Sunday morning. I'm on my way to church. Okay. And, okay. Maybe I better say 2 prayers instead of 1 today. That's Guy McPherson, Professor Emeritus of Natural Resources and Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Arizona. Also in the studio with me, Carrie Leiterson. I'm going to take another break, and then we're going to take some phone calls. But before I do, very, very quickly, a couple of things. There are people who think you've gotten it wrong. A guy named Scott Johnson, which I'm sure you're aware of. He says, I'm going to read from his blog post since he's not here. He writes, let's briefly lay out the central claims of McPherson's position and review what the science really says. I think those are 1, positive feedbacks imply runaway global warming. 2, we will experience at least 3 to 4 degrees centigrade warming in the next couple of decades. And 3, on a 4°C warmer planet, humans are dead. And he takes issue. For instance, he says there is such a thing as a runaway greenhouse effect. Just ask the planet Venus. However, a recent study looking at what it would take to trigger such an event on Earth ballparked the requirements at around 75 times the amount of carbon dioxide currently in the atmosphere, 5.5 times the methane, and some other greenhouse gases. The business as usual scenario in the latest IPCC report, and by the way, that comes out tomorrow, where we do nothing to curtail greenhouse gas emissions, ends the century at about 2.3 times today's CO2 and 2 times the methane. We have a lot of things to worry about, but a runaway greenhouse isn't one of them. I'm sure you've already seen what he's written. And
yes, I have. And I've actually thought about it.
Well, good. I'm happy to hear that.
As nearly as I can tell, he didn't think about it before he wrote it, but I've thought about it.
Well, he says the same thing about you. Okay,
I know.
So you got 2 guys, 2 scientists yelling back at each other about this. Somebody's right and somebody's wrong, or is it somewhere between the 2?
I suspect that at least somebody is wrong.
All right, you're very
at the very least.
You're very.
He's citing an organization that we know has been incredibly conservative and putting out a document that is vetted through the political process before it's released.
And you don't have a lot of patience for the political process at the moment and the documents that are put out by the political process.
No, I don't. I mean, for example, all of this information that I'm reporting is widely known to politicians. certainly to national level politicians.
So why is nothing being done? I guess that's my other question is,
Exactly.
Barack Obama knows this, the CIA knows this, the NSA knows this, everybody in the high upper echelons knows this, and yet they are doing business as usual.
Exactly.
So they want the world to collapse? Is that the idea, or do they think it's going to? So we're going to, magically escape it somehow?
No, I think they're doing everything they can to keep the balls in the air for as long as possible. You don't know you've triggered a self-reinforcing feedback loop until after you've triggered it. You can only see it in the rearview mirror. And of course, essentially every citizen of this country wants to maintain this set of living arrangements, and it doesn't really matter that we drive 200 species to extinction every day. It doesn't really matter that we cause mass mortality in other countries with every drone we send. People want to maintain this set of living arrangements at all costs. And politicians who run on a contrary message are not going to be elected. There's no politically viable approach to dealing with either collapse induced by global peak oil or dealing with runaway climate change. There's no way to get elected if you point out that...
That's true, actually.
Yeah, right. So why would they? There's nothing in it for them. There's very little money in economic collapse. As nearly as I can tell, there's none to be made by pointing out extinction, human extinction.
And you think ultimately that's where we're going?
I can't see that we can stop it at this point. We've fired the Clathrate gun.
But you're preparing. You live in the mud hut. You've got this thing you call the mud hut. And, you're trying to use permaculture techniques to exist. What's the point? Why not go out and have a bottle of champagne?
I made the decision to do that 6.5 years ago before the situation was so dire on the climate front. It was unquestionably the worst mistake of my life. I'm glad you brought that up, just to sort of rub it in a little bit.
Well, I didn't realize I was rubbing it in. Okay.
No, that's okay. Of course, we adhere to the principles of permaculture at the Mud Hut. That decision was made a long time ago. If I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have made that decision to move to that place.
Really?
No question about it. Because in part, I moved there because of the collapse that was coming. Now we know that when collapse comes, it will drive the temperature increase there to such a high level that humans won't survive beyond a few weeks.
And where is that located?
This is southwestern New Mexico.
Yeah, I thought about that. I figured you were in that part of the country, and I'm thinking, that's got to be, with global warming, that's got to be a crazy place to set up shop.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
I'm going to Manitoba.
Hey,
that's going to be my new bumper sticker.
Mistakes
I'm
were
moving
made,
to
man.
Manitoba.
Mistakes were made, including by me.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad to hear that you are human after all. Okay, I have to break, and then we'll take some phone calls. And I'm telling you, Carrie, anytime you want to stop him, talk him off the ledge.
Please do.
I think just quickly, to me, it really doesn't matter whether we're talking about collapse. I personally don't foresee that collapse situation happening, especially not first in the U.S. But, I think the bigger picture is we know it's bad regardless. And, personally, I think all the things you say about politics and what's being done and what's not being done, it doesn't even matter if you're talking extinction in 40 years or if you're talking what's already happening, especially in developing countries. So, I personally just sort of tune out sometimes. And I lived for a year in Boulder, which, is ground zero of the heated debate over the minutia of the different studies, which, I personally think just remains to be seen. I don't think anyone's wrong or right. So, but we'll see what we can do.
Well, the fact that there is this debate, maybe this is the best thing that could happen, is that there is this debate. And I wish there were more people out there. You may disagree with Scott Johnson and what he writes, but at least he's responding. At least he has taken up the gauntlet and is trying to make a cogent argument for something that you disagree with.
Well, yes. Furthering the discussion is the best thing I could hope for at this point. I don't expect people to accept what I say unquestioningly. I never taught like that in the 20 years I was at the University of Arizona. I didn't use a sage on the stage approach. I asked questions, and I expected students to ask questions as well.
Okay.
I used classroom anarchy.
Classroom anarchy.
Chaos is an absence of rules. Anarchy is an absence of rulers. Anarchy means taking responsibility for yourself and for your neighbors.
Ah, okay.
So I employed classroom anarchy, where all the voices in the room are contributors to the conversation, can move the discussion forward. So I'm a huge fan of having this conversation, and I appreciate you having it on your show.
Well, I had to, and especially when I found out you were in town, and it just worked out that you could be here in the studio. You're scaring people half to death, but maybe that's not a bad thing. It's the Mike Novak Show on Chicago's Progressive Talk, AM and FM. I'm, of course, coming out of the conversation that we've been having. I have to play Queen, Keep Yourself Alive. It's going to be touch and go for the next few decades. And I'm pleased to have Guy McPherson in the studio, Professor Emeritus at the University of Arizona, Carrie Liderson, environmental reporter here. Carrie, before the end of the show, we're going to get to a quick pet coke update that I got from my buddy Tom Shepard at the Southeast Environmental Task Force. Let's go to the phones and bring in Bob. You're on the Mike Novak Show. Good morning.
Hello. Yeah, I want to talk about something that I'm also a scientist. I'm a geographer and biologist, retired from the Environmental Protection Agency, and I've gone to some climate change conferences myself. Something that I've not heard anybody talking about that makes it actually worse than what we've been hearing. Climate change scientists generally talk about the loss of albedo as snowfields and ice caps disappear, and the acceleration of change from increasing CO2 release and evolution of methane from the permafrost in the oceans. And we've also heard about the buffer effect offered by the oceans. But what I've not heard discussed, even in the scientific community, is that the ice caps have been providing a massive buffer that will all too soon be gone. I'm talking about the phase change effect here. Heat inputs currently are absorbed by liquid water on the Earth's surface, and that change occurs in a linear fashion at the rate of 1 calorie per gram of water. But polar and glacial ice melt. As the polar and glacial ice melt, every gram of water of ice absorbs 80 calories of heat. If you just look at the hundreds of trillions of tons of polar and glacial ice that already are disappearing due to excessive heat inputs, just imagine the amount of heat that they have been absorbing as they melt. What happens when those are gone, when the ice caps are gone? We'll not only see an accelerating curve, and the slope of that curve is going to be changing as the clathrates release the methane. But we'll see a sharply and very suddenly accelerating curve. Just imagine a glass of water with a few ice cubes in it, sitting on a tabletop, say at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. You place the thermometer in and time the temperature rise. The water in the glass will remain close to the freezing point until the ice is gone. And then suddenly, comparatively speaking, in a matter of over the next half hour, it will rise up to the same temperature as the rest of the room. It will be held at close to the freezing point as long as there's ice. Mm. And that's kind of like, think of the Earth as that glass of water with ice floating in it.
That's an amazing observation, and Dr. McPherson is here nodding his head. Guy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in my climate change summary and update, I write about that. To convert a gram of ice to a milliliter or a gram of water requires, at 0 degrees, 0 degrees ice to 0 degrees water requires 79.2 calories, about 80 calories, as Bob pointed out. Once that ice is converted to water, so we have liquid water at 0 degrees, we add in 79.2 calories, temperature rises to 79.2 degrees centigrade. So that same energy that is being absorbed by the ice right now, when the Arctic ice is gone, and it will be within a very short period of time, within a few years, all the energy that's being absorbed by that ice and converted to liquid water is going to be warming up very, very quickly.
Can I make a quick ask a quick question about that? We talk about the ice disappearing. Will that be year-round disappearing or just in the summer?
Initially, just in September, just in the late summer. That's right.
And then gradually, as the oceans warm,
right,
we can expect not to see any ice in the Arctic Sea at all.
That's right, but bear in mind that we haven't had an ice-free Arctic for the last 3 to 5 million years. We've had humans on the planet in some form far less time than that. So we've never had humans on a planet with an ice-free Arctic, ever. And that's where we're headed in September in the not-too-distant future.
Okay, Bob, I'm going to let you have one more comment. Yes.
Yeah. It's more than just the North Pole. It's also all the glacial ice at the South Pole and Greenland.
Yeah.
I mean, those are huge ice cubes. That's, much more massive than the North Polar ice.
So Bob, have you read Guy's work? And do you?
Actually, I haven't. I've been listening to the mainstream scientific community that has been talking about it. But, no, I haven't read his work.
Well, you can go to my website, MikeNovak.net, and see the links there, or you can go to GuyMcPherson.com. Thank you so much for calling. Wonderful insight. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And let's go to Mark. You're on the Mike Novak Show. Good morning. Mark? Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, got hopefully two questions. Hopefully you can get to both of them.
We'll try one because we're running out of time. Try the most important question.
Okay, I guess the most important one is something you've addressed a little bit of, but the two things that are causing inaction. One is the climate deniers. What's the best way to convince people like my parents that it's not just a hoax among the wealthy elite? Al Gore with his 10,000 plus square foot home trying to make money. So that's one simple one. The other one is the other scenario is those who say, yeah, we're doomed. There's nothing we can do. So why should we even try? Or should we just say that's the right path? Eat, drink, be merry, and what?
Well, okay, those are really good questions, and I'm going to let you listen off air, and we have addressed one of them already. You Guy have said that we should continue to do what we should to protect the planet, and that is that whole course that Tom Hartman says that you have to have hope, even though you call those people you call it hopium, that they're smoking the crack pipe of hopium. Do you still say that?
Well, I don't. Yes, I still say that. I think I agree with Nietzsche. Hope in reality is the worst of evils.
There's a pleasant guy.
For it extends the torments of man. And had he not been such a misogynist, I'm pretty sure he would have included women in that too. Hope is hopeless.
Another reason maybe not to pay attention to Nietzsche.
Action is the antidote to despair. Let's get over hope and act instead.
Okay, and what about the first part about the climate deniers? I mean, there has been a systematic campaign to...
It's $1 billion a year industry in the United States alone, of course. But I don't think... I don't encourage people to try to convince people at this point. The writing is on the wall. People are going to see it. I don't know when they're going to see it, but trying to convince people who are in denial is pretty much a waste of your time. Try to pursue a life of excellence. Try to pursue some joy. Try to live in the moment instead of making other people miserable.
Well, and also, as we talked about the political process, we know that a bulk of regular people believing in climate change isn't actually going to drive policy anyway. It comes down so much.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I've learned that working with politicos over the last few years, and your ideas bounce off their foreheads. They look at you like you're an alien.
I mean, there was massive support for a more comprehensive health care reform, and that didn't happen. So that's just a good example of how, convincing regular people, unfortunately, isn't really the real challenge.
Well, we're out of time, and we could go another 3 hours. And Dr. McPherson, thank you for stopping by the studio. I hope we help some people understand this a little better and move them to take some action.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mike. I really do appreciate it.